Hi, hi, this is Santiago Zapata, and this is my series of live coding sessions. Today we continue working on OpenArthurianX6. We are going to be finishing or working towards finishing the work in the pathfinding now that we have divided the world into chunks. So let's see how it's currently looking because I had to do quite a lot of work since the last live coding session, and frankly if I had done that live it would not have been a lot of fun because it was pretty I don't know how to say, like boring. Frustrating is the word. Yeah, I had to do a lot of work in order to get the uh, chunks to work, but well, it's working now, so that's great. I'm gonna show you how it's currently looking. So basically what we have now is um, three three small chunks of the world, and we are seamlessly, I guess, loading them. So from the player's perspective, it's a single world. That's what we wanted, and I'm going to show you the chunks here. So we got Ayala's Hut, West Forest, and East Forest. These three chunks, and for the player, it's a single map. So let's serve it, and let's check here. Okay, here it is. So starts here. There's still some broken things if you compare the current milestone 998. Well, the latest demo. Um, for example, the NPCs for some reason are still not reacting to you. That's something that we gotta check, the triggers part. And but well, if you talk to him, the pathfinding is also broken. That's what we're going to address today. Um, and also, this is the same. The triggers are not working, so I can walk past these guys. But the most important part is the chunk. So as you see, we're still here in the chunk number 1. You see these flower fields. And we're transitioning to the chunk number 2. Uh, and you see here that the second chunk at the position x1, y0 was loaded, and that was transparent for the player. So that's what we wanted. That's great. The player walked into this map actually. So that's what we managed to do after the entire refactoring, and then also yesterday fixing the problem that I had was that for some reason Phaser has this tile map layer objects which are supposed to be like similar to normal sprites or game objects in Phaser, but that's not really true because you cannot position them freely. And what I wanted to do was load different of these layers and then position them one to the side of the other. That was the idea. But it had some logic that is wired to the camera. So you could not like move them freely. And in the end, what I had to do was to, instead of using these tiled map layers, I'm not using them. Instead of that, I'm loading the map from JSON and then rendering the all the tiles in the map or all the content of the map into images. And these images can be more freely manipulated. So that works much better, and I believe it's also more optimal. So this tile map layer class or these tile map layer objects have a lot of stuff that we are not really using. They have some pathfinding, they have some logic that you can use to get different objects in the map, whatever. We're not using that. We were just using them to render the map visually into the world, and that could be supplemented with what I did with the images. So anyways, so now we're gonna fix the pathfinding, and let's go into that. Um, as with the previous refactors that we did, we had the chunk class, and the chunk class we moved a lot of stuff from here into the world class. But right now we have these objects, pathfinding grids. That is part of the pathfinding.js library that we're using. And I have been considering, yesterday I did not code, but I was thinking a lot of this and how it should work. And I believe we're going to keep the pathfinding grids inside the chunk, and we're going to use that for these kind of long paths. So in the schedules, for instance, in the schedules of the NPCs, we have the this thing where, for example, here in Ayolo's hut, let me show you that. Where is it? Here, Ayolo's hut. We have this. So in here, if we make the mobs visible, we have these two mobs, and they have schedules, and there are doors. So, for example, this mob has a schedule. Well, actually, the two of them, they go to work here, and then they go to sleep here. And I believe for that, we're going to keep the pathfinding at the chunk level. So the schedules that you're going to define in the game, in the engine, when you are defining a town or something like that, you'll have to consider that. You'll have to consider that the destinations are local to the chunk, right? And for that, we're going to keep using the pathfinding grid that is local to each chunk. But there's also a different pathfinding that is done when you are in combat, for instance, and I believe also when you are following some mob. For that pathfinding, we're going to use something similar to what we use for the line of sight. That is, each mob is going to have a pathfinding grid created specifically for when he wants to get the path to somewhere. And maybe we will optimize that later so that we can reuse that path that we already have, and we don't have to create a new pathfinding grid of for every step. But that's going to be like a additional optimization. That's not going to be on day zero. So let's go ahead and try that. And in the code, we have something like long path. Let's maybe I move the read to the world class. Long, 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 long path. So finding a long path. Um, we already moved a lot of stuff from the chunk class to the world class for the pathfinding because I figured in the end it was going to be here, but yeah, it's not going to be that simple. So find long path, finds a long path with our location. But yeah, I mean, we are still going to be uh, having this layer where this abstraction layer where the mobs will not know about the chunks. The chunks is a technical stuff that is should be hidden from other parts of the API, I guess. So yeah, find long path, if you see here, is being called by the mobs when they have to get the next step towards an activity, right? That is part of the NPC schedules. And they are going to continue doing that. But what we're going to do here is we're going to get the current chunk. We have a function for that, get chunk. It receives the X and the Y. And we can use, so in here we're going to need something else. Well, we have two, all right. From this location, yeah, and it's gonna be the same. So we are getting the chunk of the world for the location where the path starts. And actually, with the location where the path ends, it's gotta be on the same chunk, else it's not going to return a path. But we're going to assume that is the case. And then we simply are going to return current chunk that find long path. Uh, and in here we're going to do a correction. Yeah, that's important. We're going to transform these coordinates, which are from world space into chunk space. And that's as simple as doing a modulus. So we're going to do that. Chunk x is 2.x modulus the chunk size of the world. We're reading the world class, so we get access to the chunk size attribute. And the same is going to be for the chunk y variable. and that is what we send to the chunk from X and chunk to X. We gotta do that from Y, sorry. We gotta do that for both coordinates. So chunk from X, chunk to X to Y, from X and from Y. We gotta convert that. So what is happening here is the coordinates of the that the mobs know about are on the world space, but we're going to be sending this to the chunk object, so we need to translate them. That is, for instance, if the player wants to move from here to here, the location of this mob is not given on these local coordinates, but rather on the world coordinates. In this case, they are the same because this is like the the upper right, upper left map. But say for instance, if we had it here, we will need to transform the space from the world space into the local space for this chunk, because that's what the pathfinding grid knows about. So we do that, and in here we're going to move all this logic to the back to the chunk class. So we have an object that is a similar name, and it's here, but I forgot the signature of the class. I'm going to add it back. Okay, that includes also moving this. I'm going to also move back this function, get grid with mobs blocked. And again, if we had the transition to TypeScript already, it would be easier. I still have the plan of doing that once the entire work with the chunks is done. That's gonna be something that we do quickly. So get grid with mobs blocked has been moved already. What else we use here? From this find path and objects. Objects is already an attribute of the chunk, so we are fine. To already move this, we need to move find path as well. So let's move find path that is here. We're moving this back and forth because that used to be part of the label class, which we refactored into the chunk class. The pathfinding grids are still here, so we're good. All right, and this is a global thing, I believe. Or if not, we're going to find out soon. And then for this other function, where was it? Get grid with mobs blocked. So we use the pathfinding grids, get mobs of alignment. So that this is interesting. So when we are calculating a path to a given location, we should consider the mobs, right? Because they block the way. And in here we have a mixture where we want to discard the mobs from the path, but we have an issue here because the mobs are no longer part of the chunk. We move them into the world, so we gotta decide how to handle this. Uh, Definitively, we will not have lists of mobs into the chunk class because it will be a bit cumbersome to be handling the additions and removals of them, like adding them when they move between chunks, which is completely possible. So we are not going to do that. Um, I wonder what we should do then. We could like, all right, so this is in the chunk level. We could obtain a subset of the mobs in the world that are currently in that chunk. That seems a bit expensive. But I don't think there's other way to do it. Let's go with that option. So the chunk, I don't know, maybe it has a reference to the world. No, doesn't seem like it. Chunk world. No, that world is something. Party member. No, only the mobs have a reference to the world right now. Um, we need to somehow have that reference. Either that or pre-sending the mobs to the find path. Hmm. That looks better. Yeah, let's try to do that. So when trying to find a long path, instead of just having this flag, we're going to already have defined the list of mobs that we don't want to include in the path, that we want to mark as blocking the path. So that's a bit of a change of how it currently works. Let's see what else we have on the menu before diving into it. I believe that's it. So this won't work. Mobs are not in the chunk. Okay. And then get grid with mobs blocked. Get grid. This is now going to be simpler. Get grid with cells blocked, something like that. Because we will no longer know why they are blocked, because we're going to have that info sent from above. Get grid with positions blocked. No, from one place, from one place. What to a place? Where do we get the from? Okay, so we're just getting the clone. Why do we need this? I don't know. We should not be needing uh, this thing. It's just being used to get to ignore the current mob, to ignore something, but I don't know what. All right, to ignore the mobs at the initial. So that what is happening here is that if we don't do this, the initial location of the path will be marked as solid, and then the path will be empty. But that's no longer going to happen because we are going to take care of that in somewhere above. All right. So this is we gotta do this carefully. But the advantage we have is that we already sent the big batch of the initial changes of the chunk level to the repo. So any changes will be easier to track here. All right. So find long path will have this parameter is no longer going to be this flag. It's going to be something else. It's going to be like blocked positions. And we're going to we're going to send that in the world class. So in here, find long path, current chunk. Okay, so we hadn't added the parameters here. To, from, Z, and blocked positions. This is what it needs. And we're going to use, well, we have chunk X, chunk Y. Let me see if it makes sense. Well, let's do that for now. Let's create this object. But from, let's change this. Chunk2 is going to be an object which has this X and this Y. And chunk from, so similar. And that is what we send to this function. Chunk2, chunk from, Z, and blocked positions. And then in here is where we're going to have this logic, include mobs of alignment. So we need to create this blocked position list. But um, we're going to do that using this logic that we used to have in here. Get grid with position. Well, it had a different name with mobs blocked. So we're going to copy this logic from here and into here, something like this. We're going to put that in a function rather. Blocked positions is going to be equal to this dot get uh, positions blocked by mobs of a given alignment, and then we're going to remove the uh, destination is it, or was it yeah, remove the destination from the list of blocked positions. And that is what is going to do. That is what this function is going to be. Get positions blocked by mobs of a given alignment. Then we have something additional here. We need to put this in the context of the chunk. We need to put this in the context of the chunk. Let's see. That's a bit tricky because I believe if we don't partition the space where the mobs are, it's going to not be very optimal. And come to think about it, I mean, the best location or the best place where we could put the partition would be the chunks. So yeah, this is going back and forth because I could do something here like go through all the list of the mobs in the entire world and then segment them the list of active mobs because we're also going to have inactive mobs and then filter them so that I only include the ones inside the world space of this chunk. But yeah, that's maybe a bit expensive, but not very expensive. And this is not being called like every frame or something like that. Let's go with that solution. So again, we will need another helper function. But before we do that helper function, we need to have another value here that is the x and y of the chunk, and that is different to this because that is rather we already have that logic somewhere in here. Let's find it. Yeah, right. So here we got this get from chunk, and we have, well, what I need is actually this. Okay, so it's just these two lines of code. Let's not create a function for that. So this is different. This is the position inside the chunk, while this is the chunk, the position of the chunk in the world map. Bear with me. We are also not only going to take one of these, so 2.x, rather from.x, and from.y. And we're going to get positions blocked by mobs in this chunk. And that simply means that we're going to filter. Why do we have an error here? What happened? I probably screwed up something somewhere. Maybe this? No. I don't know why it's complaining about this. Oh, because of this. Okay. So we're going to do this, but then we filter the mob to only include mobs where m.x is over chunk x plus chunk size. And this is not very optimal, but let's see how this works. It's lesser than this dot chunk plus 1 minus 1. That is like the limit of the chunk. And the same for y. That is, we're filtering out the mobs that may be somewhere else. Yeah, it's this way. I guess other way that we could do this would be just include all the mobs, and then when we are setting them, do the same check and not include them, or just rely that they will be put on out of bounds in the pathfinding grid. But let's do it like this for now. Okay, so we're filtering this. Let's remove this thing. So now we have the mobs that are in the chunk, and then for each mob we are going to have this list of the positions blocked by mobs. And we're going to include them. But again, we need to translate them back into the chunk space. So there's a lot of transformations going on here. Because we need to translate back position of the mob modulus the chunk size. Hopefully this will work. So we are getting this list of positions blocks by mobs of a given alignment inside a given chunk. We're using that here. And we need to remove the position from. So that is like a small hack that we do. We don't include this position. So we're going to find or gather remove. Let me dig that real quick. And to never be afraid to look up stuff because, JavaScript remove from array, from array? That's not an array. What is it? I'm blocked today from list. But yeah, we need to find it. Remove but finding. Find the index of, yeah, let's just find the index of. So we're going to do remove splice bit 1 Yeah, okay. We're going to splice. Does splice return a new? Change the content of the array. Okay, so this is what we need. Splice one object, and the object we want to splice is at block position dot find index of position that is the same, where position dot x is the same as from dot x, and position dot y is the same as from dot y. This is a bit messy, but that's what we just did. Remove the from position from this list. Why is it complaining now? Okay, because we're not using TypeScript and it doesn't know that this is actually a list. And we're sending now that list of block position to the find long path inside current chunk. Find long path block position. We are just in here get grid with positions blocked, and we send this, and it's going to change and maybe be very much simpler. This function is going to be much simpler because it's just going to mark these things as not walkable. Yeah, just going to do some work in the grid clone. Much simpler. I would just want to double check this logic that we have here for each alignment. We get the mobs of that alignment, we filter them so that they are inside the chunk, and then we add the block position. This should be fine. And then it's doing some logic that it can do internally. You know, it has the doors, so the doors are part of the chunk, so that should be fine. Their position is local, and yeah, this hasn't changed. This is the same. So let's test it out. Let's test how these long paths work. If it works, then the some of the schedules should work. So we're going to see that working. But in order to test this more easily, let's teleport so that we start at the first chunk and not at the third one. Sable, build, it built, and then let's end new game. Are you going to go to sleep? Don't see any error, but don't see them moving either way. So these guys are completely static right now. Now we are going to have to debug this. So find long path. What's going on with you? Find long path. Are you even trying to use it? Let's see. Oh well, this is the find long path from the chunk. Let's check here. Restart this. Are you going to try to find the long path or not? So I mean, it doesn't seem to be trying to use it at all. So it's not even kicking the pathfinding. Find long path, walk towards activity. Something's going on here when it's deciding the next activity. Schedule check turns. Probably something regarding the distance to the activity. So let's put some breakpoint here and restart. So this is the logic for the NPCs. And it's not kicking at all. Follow schedule. What's going on here? Follow schedule. The sub intent. So this is the AI for the mobs. And the follow schedule sub intent doesn't seem to be called. That is defined based on the distance to the player. If mob is too far forward from the player and hasn't been attacked, it must not act, except if it's following a schedule. Hmm. It's not a party member. It's not panicked, and yeah, for some reason it's not getting this intent. So let's put a breakpoint here. It's probably going to be a bit spammy. All these mobs are like dead. They don't want to do anything. They're like, oh, maybe they are not active. That's probably the issue. They are not. They haven't been activated. Um, that's probably the issue. So inside the chunk, we had this activate all. Well, it's now part of the world, I believe. Activate all, and probably this is not being called from anywhere. Well, it's being called actually. Activate all when combat ends. Activate all when the world loads. But that's the problem. This is not enough because by this, by this point, the mobs of the world haven't been loaded. That's interesting. If we check the activate all function here, all it does is call inactivate. I believe what we gotta do is we gotta activate a list of mobs after they are loaded by the chunk. So if we check chunk loader, in here we are creating the mobs. We are returning that. So let's see where we use that. Chunk dot but this is when it's being restored. But when it's being created, we are loading the mob and then adding it to the world. And I believe it should be safe to activate it here. But for safety, this is just the mob data. Let's try activating them here. Just calling mob.activate. Or we could activate it as it gets added to the world. And discard this activate all call from here. That's another option. Remove that from here and just do that inside each in here. World add mob. Not just push it here, but also activate. Where is this function? Yeah, let's try that. If all goes well, we have a lot of breakpoints firing. On here, we're also actually going to have to start removing breakpoints. And we have an error. Great. Error. And this is the same that happened last live stream. Like for some reason, instead of throwing the error, it's like silently making it go away. What happened here? It's going insane for some reason. Nothing happened there. We're going to activate this because that's the only way to catch the exception that is happening. So player state machine is not defined. So this was not being called. This is actually part of the previous refactor, but the problem is that the mobs were not being activated, and so we were missing this error. I'll see if I can commit that part individually. So that's probably, yeah, it's part of the world class. Is it? Is in combat? Yeah. Player state machine is not defined here, and we need to define it, or we need to reference it. I believe it's cleaner to reference it like this from the global object, because if we require, we can end up with some require cycles, and that's not good. Save, rebuild, and then try to recover from here. The best way is to create a new tab and close this one, because else it gets crazy. And there's probably going to be more similar things, so let's leave it like that. And still the same, it did not refresh well. Okay, now it's updated. Let's spot the breakpoint and start again. And we have a similar thing. Geo, that distance. Geo, that one's safer to import. So let's import that. Geo, did it work? Okay, it worked. Rebuild. Geo. On the sun again. Combat distance is not defined. Anywhere. Maybe we remove that at some point. What it was meant to be, I don't know. So this is the function that determines if a given mob is in combat. And it's like checking the distance of that mob to the party. Party bounding box is like a box built around the entire party. So if you have like your party members separated, this box is like a what determines where the party is, where the party is. And this dx and dy, is it like the, okay, so this is like the middle of the bounding box, and this is some kind of distance to that. I don't know what this is. So let's, I don't want to. This is the world class. Okay, so that's easy. Yeah, let's check into the repo, see what value that was meant to be, because we cannot be changing everything at the same time. So that's probably here in the labeled class. Source, JS, level class. Combat distance was then 10. So we're going to keep that. But yeah, now it's on the world class. Revealed. Check again. And what happened there? This is not good at all because are we stuck on something? Okay, so it's stuck creating the chunk. But the problem here is that it's not because of an error, but rather this is something recursive. So we're going to check that. Let's put a breakpoint here and let's run. And this is another thing. Let's remove this. So we're stuck here. And in here, it's loading the map over and over again. It's the same issue that we are not being able to save the chunk that we created once it's created. But I find it weird. I mean, we should be able to do that. Let's go to the create chunk function and see what's going on there. So we create a new chunk, assign the map ID, load the tile map. What? An out of bounds error happens inside the show tray function. Yeah, this is the kind of weird stuff that you find while debugging JavaScript sometimes. So it's happening inside the load tile map. So probably what's going on here is that the reason for the activate function to exist was that it's going to try to act, and the game is not ready for that. So we cannot, one doesn't simply activate this. This won't work. This needs to be done after the world has been created and the chunk has been stored. So going back to this, we need to keep a list, either keep a list of the, okay, so let's do this. We either keep a list of the mobs that we just created, or we call activate all, but inside a given chunk. So we would have, did I remove activate all? No, it's here, okay. So activate all in chunk. This is going to be chunk X and chunk Y. 10 minutes, so hopefully we can do this. We are going to filter them again. Um, where was it? We just started it. In here. Where's the filtering happening? Here, this one. So let's move this. Create another function for get mobs in chunk. I need to get the function. Mobs. Okay. So get mobs in chunk is going to use the mobs, filter them with this. Yeah. And then we're going to do this the opposite way. Get mobs in this chunk and then filter them by alignment. Or what does this do again? How to debug. And you don't have, let's see if it's not, okay. Filter by this alignment, so okay. All it does is this. So we're going to replicate that here. And this receives chunk X and chunk Y. And what I was going to do with all this was, I forgot. Activating them. All right, so activate all in chunk. It's going to need the get mobs in chunk, chunk X, chunk Y, and it's going to all activate for them. And are we calling activate all? Huh. This is interesting. It seems like we're going to need to keep the activate all function. So after combat, when you go into combat, all the mobs get deactivated because they are no longer moving. I mean, the world is no longer controlling them, but the turn-based combat system takes charge of everything. So that's going to remain here. And in here, we're going to crap. I don't know. Let me see something. I think we can make this simpler. It doesn't do a lot. It just tries to set the act. Oh no, actually, this calls the act function. If we call it in a mob that is already active, it should probably do nothing. So let's do something different here. Let's call the activating active. Create an activating active function. But the problem is that we don't know what mobs are inactive. Executing action. Executing action is what determines if a mob is active. I don't know. All right. So yeah, we're a bit stuck here a little bit. I think I'll stop this live coding session here, and tomorrow we will continue taking a look at this. So thank you for watching.